This is the OFN meeting room. And before we talk Houston Texans football, make sure to order America's #1 draft guide for 39 years and counting, the Ourlads Draft Guide, by logging on to ourlads.com. And you can actually see the guide right here. Here it is. Just came out. I just got my guide yesterday. No team in the NFL has made as many controversial moves this offseason in Houston. Let's go inside the Texans' hectic offseason with Mark Lane, managing editor for the Texans Wire at USA Today. Mark, what's more hectic, the Houston Texans offseason or your plumbing issues?
I would have to say the Houston Texans offseason, because first of all, they blow a 24-0 lead on the road against the eventual Super Bowl champions Kansas City Chiefs in the divisional playoffs. Then Chairman and CEO Cal McNair decides, you know what, we've seen enough from Coach Bill O'Brien and how he had considerable influence over this 5-man general managing council, even though Chris Olsen was the interim GM. And we like what we've seen. Let's go ahead and double him up as general manager and go ahead and declare Jack Easterby as the executive vice president of football operations. So, fans were upset about that, but it's, if I would say that the quickest way to get rid of Bill O'Brien is to give him a whole bunch. If you're a Bill O'Brien hater, this is what I'm saying. Give him a whole bunch of power, because if he fails as you expect him to, then it should be clear to Cal McNair at that point. So that happened, but it was kind of expected because he had such influence on the roster and on the team. So what? But then Bill O'Brien really started to make his moves, and when the report came out that DeAndre Hopkins was being traded on March 16th for David Johnson, who has not had an all-pro season, not even come close to it since 2016, that really it's quite a risk. It is quite a gamble, because DeAndre Hopkins is someone who had tremendous chemistry with Deshaun Watson. He could fill in at virtually every spot as a receiver in the offense, and you take him away. He was a really great locker room guy, so that unto itself just invites, insurrection, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a risk that was undertaken in trading Hopkins. But when you look at it from an X's and O's point of view, on paper with this receiving core, you've got Brandon Cooks, who brings some speed, but it's kind of redundant to the speed that Will Fuller brings, and Will Fuller is just a catalyst for that offense. And then you bring in Randall Cobb, who's an excellent slot receiver. You have Kenny Stills, who's kind of a jack of all trades and can fill in anywhere. And then what if Johnson does have a renaissance season?
Yeah.
Then they've solved things. On paper, it looks good. It's just your receiving core. The 4 guys I mentioned, they missed time in all of 2019. Each one of those guys did. And I know it was freak concussions with Brandon Cooks. He missed 2 games with the Los Angeles Rams. But still, that's a question mark that has to be answered one way or the other. And then David Johnson, he was relegated to a backup role with the Cardinals as it was. If he really was that great with his skill set, don't you think Cliff Kingsbury would have been using him? So what it has done is it's invited even more scrutiny of the Bill O'Brien regime. Mm-hmm. But like I said at the beginning, when they officially named him general manager, is now all the power is going to be on Bill O'Brien. Yep. And I don't think, God forbid, it comes to it, that Cal McNair is going to choose Bill O'Brien over Deshaun Watson. If Watson feels like he can't get along with O'Brien, which, by the way, that's just something interesting to write articles about or decipher his cryptic lyrics. O'Brien and Watson have a good working relationship, always have. Watson was a Bill O'Brien pick, even though he came with the move of general manager Rick Smith at the time in 2017, wheeling and dealing with the Browns to move up to take him. Watson is an O'Brien guy. It's just you get some of those emotions that occur when someone like Hopkins gets traded. And that's the other thing with this whole COVID-19 thing that's going on is you can't get into the mix of the offseason. The offseason workouts should have taken place by now.
Yeah.
So you can't really even turn the page on these bad decisions because there's no football. So it just continues to linger and fester, kind of like an open wound when you have scurvy and no vitamin C.
Well, let's talk about because let's try and look at it from a perspective of let's just look at the depth chart. Let's not look at the moves or the players that left the team. Let's take a look at this depth chart and the money they have, because salary cap obviously important, their draft pick situation. But first, the depth chart. When I look at the depth chart and we see Deshaun Watson, we see one of the top quarterbacks in the league. Maybe David Johnson is going to have a great year. Nobody knows because it wasn't a knee injury. It was a wrist injury. And since the wrist injury, he went from being this spectacular rookie to disappearing. That's just so weird that I'm willing to give him a shot and say, well, maybe he just didn't fit in Arizona for whatever reason. And Bill O'Brien will find a way to get him back to playing like a rookie. Okay, maybe that's possible. Maybe he's smarter than the rest of us. And then you got Cooks, and maybe Fuller stays healthy, and maybe Waring is healthy this year. You got the offensive line is better, talented, more talent than it's been in years, and maybe this is going to be the most explosive offense Houston's ever had. Who knows? I mean, It's possible.
No, it is possible. Like I said, when you look at it on paper, if you had that squad on Madden, that might win you some games. But for me, it comes down to the health of that receiving core. And I'll give Brandon Cooks the benefit of the doubt and say that he had some misfortune with concussions in 2019. I'll give that to him. But Will Fuller missed 5 games last year. He has missed games ever since he's been in the league. His biggest inability is his availability. So that's a problem. Then you have Randall Cobb, and it was interesting in his conference call that he had with the Houston media in late March. He talked about how he kind of had this resurgence in Dallas because their strength and conditioning staff helped him with his hamstrings, which were given out and kind of led to his departure in Green Bay. So will his hamstrings, will they hold up in Houston the way they did in Dallas? I mean, it's still the Lone Star State, so maybe they will with enough Whataburger. If he's on the Whataburger diet, it might. But that's something that has to be answered. I just don't know about the health of these guys. And then you talk about David Johnson with the wrist injury. And that's true. It cost him that 20. I mean, he was going to be. You don't know how many people took him in their fantasy leagues in 2017.
Yeah.
And then he's done after a game. I mean, that's just such a blow. But nonetheless, if he does have a breakout season, not more like I said, a renaissance season, then that cures their problem at running back, and it doesn't look so bad that that they let Carlos Hyde go, which, by the way, yes, he did get an offer from the Texans. He didn't get an offer from anyone else because the other teams don't want to sign someone and have it mess with their compensatory formula. So just look for Carlos Hyde to get taken after the draft when signing free agents doesn't count against the compensatory formula.
Okay.
But yeah, like I said, on paper it looks like a very diverse offense, and
Could work.
they have they have a variety of ways that they can attack you. And with regards to the tight ends, that'll be an interesting one to watch because Darren Fells had a career year, had developed cohesion with Deshaun Watson. You have Jordan Aikens, the third-round pick from 2018. He had more catches and receptions among the tight ends, but he only had 2 touchdowns compared to Fells' 7. Then you've got those 2 guys. It's the battle for number 3. You have Holly Waring, who they picked in 2013. Picked in 2019 third round. So you have that investment. You don't want to give up on him, even though he had concussions, and that's why you put him on IR to get below the 53-man requirement for week 1. But Jordan Thomas, who they picked in 2018 in the 6th round, who had 4 touchdown catches in his rookie season, who seemed to have developed that chemistry with Watson, lost it because he was put on IR with a rib injury in preseason, wasn't able to come back but for 5 games. He's someone that you want to watch in terms of battling, trying to reclaim the spot that he had, and can he push them to make a decision with regards to Waring, Aikens, or Fells. The only way that would happen is, again, injuries or some other availability issues come up.
All right. Well, there's a few other things I want to get into regarding the makeup of the team, and that is salary cap and draft picks. So how is the cap? Because that's the important thing in my mind. When I take a look at all the moves that have been made, I got to know that O'Brien hasn't destroyed the cap. In actuality, he's doing what he needs to do in order to save money for the cap. So he feels he's also doing something that's in the best interest of the team, because maybe DeAndre Hopkins was never going to resign there. Maybe he couldn't afford it. I don't know. So is the cap better off, and do they have enough normal draft pick compensation in the coming years that is not going to be an issue, or is it an issue?
Well, first, with regards to the salary cap, they when they parted ways with Chris Olsen, who, as I said, he was the interim general manager, but he was the executive vice president of football administration. He was their salary cap guy.
All right.
They got rid of him. So they're really, even though they've got an understudy of his that has assumed the role, they're still venturing out into uncharted waters in terms of managing their salary cap. And, I think that this is where Bill O'Brien, the GM, is going to get exposed, because he runs the general managing like a coach would. And if you go to Texans Wire, if you just look on Google, you can look. I made a couple of articles. One of them was 9 coach general managers that succeeded, like Bill O'Brien. That had success. Then you have 9 coach GMs like Bill O'Brien who were utter failures, like Rich Kotite and Butch Davis. And what happens is, if you approach it too much like a coach, then all you're thinking about is winning right now. And when you try to win right now, you may lose the future in terms of salary cap, in terms of draft picks. Yeah. So in terms of their salary cap, they're really running into trouble, because you have to. You didn't make that trade for Laramie Tunsil to be there 2 seasons. You did that because this is the guy that's going to protect your franchise I mean, it's already coming out that he seeks to get $20 million a year, which would be the highest paid offensive lineman in the league. So they're probably going to, and then just when you sign a franchise quarterback to his second deal like Deshaun Watson, that already has that already ties in a lot of your salary cap.
Absolutely.
So they probably are going to run into a few. You're probably going to see some cap casualties after June 1st, and also leading in up into the 2021 offseason, as general manager Bill O'Brien has to figure out how to get the team under the salary cap. And, you know, when you try to win right now, sometimes you get put in a bind. That's how they were able to get Brandon Cooks, by the way, is because the Rams were in a win now mode. You know, credit to them for wanting to, but in doing so, that's why they had to get rid of Gurley. That's why they had to get rid of Brandon Cooks. So that's one problem that could arise, but I'm not really worried so much about the salary cap for the Texans as I am the draft picks, because that's how you even if you encounter cap hell, even if you go to cap hell for all of your salary cap sins, the draft can bail you
That's
out,
right.
because I mean, take a look at the Dallas Cowboys, for example. That's why they're a little over. That's why they're always above average in competing, is because they've drafted so well that they let the guys go, and then they get them compensatory picks, and then they're just always a piece away, because they use their draft classes to keep them competitive, but so they still have that ammunition. For the Texans, they've really lost some of their cash because they traded away going into 2021. I think they're in okay shape to have a quality draft, even with the picks that they have in 2020. I'm looking at 2021. You won't make a pick until the third round in 2021. Now, in 2018, they were fortunate. They had 3 third-round picks, and on the first one, they nail Justin Reed. And they get an immediate contributor, a starter in year 2. That's, really a first rounder with that third round pick. But they have put themselves behind the 8 ball. They've gone into the fourth quarter down, 2 touchdowns again, if you will, for the 2021 draft, and that could be the one that really determines what happens in the O'Brien era. I think that this club, just because of how I'm not impressed with the rest of the AFC South at this point. I don't feel like the Colts have really gotten any better just because they've signed Phillip Rivers. I think it will be between them and Tennessee, and health will play a factor in really how that goes, as well as the schedule making. But I think the Texans have another shot at winning the AFC South again, being a wild card team. But it really will come down to, does Cal McNair still look at the O'Brien track record of, well, we made the playoffs when we won a playoff game, as success and going in the right direction, or does he look at it as stagnation?
Well,
and if he looks as stagnation, that's a problem.
Yeah, I was actually one of the writers for the Ourlads guide covering Houston, so I was the one that did their preview. And one of the things I noted was when I looked at the history of the organization, and before O'Brien and after and during O'Brien's tenure, and I wrote, for 12 seasons prior to O'Brien being hired, the Texans had just 3 winning seasons with 2 division titles. In the 6 seasons under O'Brien's watch, the Texans have 5 winning seasons, 4 division titles, and 2 came without Deshaun Watson. So you can't just say it's all Deshaun Watson. So that's the perspective you have to take And yeah, it happens all the time in sports. Certain coaches can get you to a certain level, and then it's time to get someone else to come in and get you over the top. Maybe that's what Bill O'Brien's done. We've also seen coaching staffs where they just wear out their welcome within 5 or 6 years, no matter how successful they are. They've worn out their welcome. It's time to move on. So I can kind of get where people would be going, especially with all these weird trades going on. But I do think it's important for people to understand before O'Brien and during O'Brien, so when ownership has to make a decision on whether to let him go or not, they can understand why it's a tough decision.
Yeah, and that's why even in my article stating that Cal McNair will ultimately have to choose between O'Brien and Watson, I did that to just because that's what everybody was thinking after the trade and the weird lyrics, Watson was putting on Twitter. I just decided, well, here, I'm just going to put this out there. But in there, I did point out that O'Brien did win those 2 division titles. And really the 2015 one, I think, is the most impressive because he did it with Brian Hoyer and Ryan Mallett and, and Brandon Whedon. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think TJ Yates might have been one of those quarterbacks. Sure. He did it with 4 different starting quarterbacks and won the division. And then they got shut out in the division, in the wild card to Kansas City. Okay. But still, to make the final 12 with 4 different starting quarterbacks, and none of them are really Pro Bowl caliber.
Yeah.
That's an impressive coaching job. And then he follows it up with doing it with Brock Osweiler, the wheels coming off the Brock Osweiler wagon, and having Tom Savage, replace him because he got benched in essence. So he does have there's something about the way he can organize a team and manage it that is appealing. But like I said, at some point he's going to have to get the Texans into the NFL's Final Four or beyond, or it's got to be like something to where they're accomplishing things that haven't been done. Obviously for the first time in the organization, but since I'm talking the Houston Oilers, and that's what if they get a number 1 now because they changed it. What if they get number 1 and they get a first round bye?
Sure.
That hasn't been done in Houston NFL lore since '93 when the Oilers got the 2nd seed. What if they get to a conference championship game? That hasn't been done in that city since 1979 in terms of, Houston NFL teams. So if they can start to if they can take the next step and it's no longer, the like the Matrix, or it's always 1999, and it's no longer 2011 when they first got to the playoffs. If they can get to the AFC Championship game and just demonstrate some sort of growth, I think O'Brien will be fine, and I think there will be an even more buying in, not really from the fans, but from the organization that he's done it. And by the way, here's something Bill O'Brien doesn't get enough credit for. You know who the most successful Bill Belichick disciple is? Bill O'Brien.
There you go.
With his 2 playoff wins. Everyone else that's ever left Belichick and coached elsewhere.
Flop. Except for Mike Vrabel, but he just is getting started.
Right, but Vrabel is a grandson on the Belichick tree. He's actually a Bill O'Brien
there you go.
Son,
Good
if
point.
you will. But still, he's had the most success among the Bill Belichick immediate disciples as a qualifier.
2 things I want to ask you about before I let you go. Let's talk defense, because defensively, look, no matter what they do offensively, and I do believe that as long as this is a healthy offense, they're going to score a ton of points. So I think they're going to be fine there. So defensively, though, the thing that just is weird about this defense from the outside perspective, and I know they have a new coordinator in Anthony Weaver, the thing that is weird to me is they run the 3-4, and I know there's variations and all that, but they run a 3-4. They've been doing it for years, and yet their top defender is J.J. Watt. who really isn't like a standard 3-4 guy. You can put him anywhere, but you don't have that prototypical 3-4 outside linebacker edge rusher. And that guy has not been there. And that is really, if you look at Denver and they won a championship, what elevated their defense? Von Miller. So I think in order for Houston to take that next step defensively, they have to figure out a way to get pressure from their linebackers. Don't you agree?
Yeah, they finished tied with the Cincinnati Bengals for the sixth fewest sacks in the NFL with 31 last year. Only the Seattle Seahawks joined the Texans in the bottom 10 of the NFL among playoff teams that were in the bottom 10 of sacks. Oh, and incidentally, Seattle had Jadeveon Clowney, so he wouldn't have helped anyway. And that was an issue that was there before Watt even tore his pectoral in Week 8. Whitney Merciless, I thought, was going to have a better season, and it looked like it the first 4 games when he had 4 sacks, and he had that interception, but he really kind of petered off and got all the attention once Watt was gone. Because 29 years old for edge rushers, that's like the magical year where it all comes together. They still have some of their youth. They have enough knowledge now to apply their physical skill. It just, it didn't really manifest for Merciless like I thought it would, but he still got the extension. Nonetheless, Houston, they've got to, what they have to do, I think, since they've addressed receiver, since they've got more cornerbacks than Carter has pills, since they've got running back figured out, since the offensive line seemingly is fixed. What they've got to do, I think, with those premium picks is they've got second and third rounder that they have is they've got to pick some edge defense.
Yep.
Maybe take a Terrell Lewis from Alabama. Maybe look at Curtis Weaver from Boise State. Jonathan Greenard from Florida. He's someone that they've shown interest in at the NFL Combine, and then they had a meeting with him, one of the virtual meetings. I think they need to address that because you have Charles Omenihu, who really was a steal from Texas out of the fifth round last year.
Yes.
So you have him so he can kind of play opposite of Watt or be a part of that rotation. But you need someone who can ultimately succeed Whitney Merciless, and if not right now, be a complement to him, someone that's a part of that pass rush. Here's someone to look out for. See if he can come back from his Achilles injury. That's Duke Ejiofor, who played at nearby Alif Taylor in the Houston area. He's someone that if he can come back, he should be able to be a contributor with their pass rush. Another guy to look out for is Jacob Martin. He's still young. I think he's coming into his 3rd season in the NFL. He can still grow into that role of being an edge rusher. And if Houston is able to get Martin on track, I mean, they've got the pieces. It's just, will the health cooperate? And then if Watt's playing 16 games, I think he commands so much attention that these guys ought to be able to feast. The interesting thing about Anthony Weaver, yes, he's been there forever under Romeo Crennel, but he does have some of the Rex Ryan influence when he was the assistant defensive line coach with the New York Jets, I think back in 2012. And that was the connection that he had to Damon Harris and why people thought Snacks would be going to Houston.
Okay. Do you think Weaver, do you trust that he can be creative enough to come up with different schemes, different ways to make this defense dangerous? Or is he just going to be, he's a Romeo Crennel disciple type of guy, and he's just going to follow suit, and it's going to be the same kind of defense, and you don't really expect it to amount to much? And okay, maybe if this player or that player like you mentioned a few of them already. If they step up, okay, maybe this, maybe that. So which way are you more confident with, that Weaver is somebody that could really transform this defense and be somebody that this unit needs, or is he just another guy?
I think that he can bring some new ideas,
Okay.
and we'll have to see if the health and availability cooperates with some of the new ideas that he has. Romeo Crennel, he's been around. My gosh, probably longer than I've been alive at the
Maybe.
NFL level. And but at a certain point, these guys, I mean, we saw it with some of the great ones like Dick LeBeau. Eventually, you know, even Father Time
Oh yeah.
starts to match your schemes, if you
Yeah,
will.
exactly.
But Cornell still has something to contribute, and that's why they're keeping around as
Sure.
assistant head coach. But Weaver, I think he will bring some of those new ideas and ways. I mean, look at the defensive line. Reeder, he was able to blossom under the tutelage of Anthony Weaver, and Charles O'Menahue. He was able to have a productive rookie season. He's someone that the players respect. He's run some of the meetings, and but like they believed he earned it when he was
Okay.
promoted
Okay.
defensive coordinator, and now that last time in the Bill O'Brien era, they let someone else be defensive coordinator and put Romeo Crennel on the bench, if you will, Mike Vrabel in 2017 next year as the Tennessee Titans head coach.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to, well, first of all, DJ Reeder, how big of a loss will that be for them?
I think it'll be. I think they'll feel it this year.
Okay.
As they try to figure out who's gonna man that nose tackle spot. Right now they've got Brandon Dunn, Timmy Jernigan, and really that's all that they have at the moment. They brought in Broderick Washington. They had a virtual visit with him from Texas Tech, but they are going to miss him, I think, for this season. He was a really good run stuffer, someone Bill O'Brien respected, even though Bill O'Brien, the GM, said they couldn't agree on financials. Bill O'Brien, the coach, really appreciated Reeder's contributions. J.J. Watt also was someone who said that Reeder made his job easier. I think they'll miss him for this season.
Okay.
But long term, I don't think that they missed out on like a Calais Campbell type of talent.
Yeah.
But I think he was someone that after 4 seasons in the league just really finally was maturing as an NFL player, and you could count on him as a reliable starter. So when you lose that, yeah, it hurts. I think it'll only hurt for this season.
When one of the last questions is, when you talk about Clowney and you talk about Hopkins and the Tunsil trade and and just all the big moves that have taken place over the last couple of years, is there like a specific move that really, and Watkins is just the easy thing to say. We understand what happened there. But if you're looking at all the moves and the reasons why O'Brien made these decisions, is there a way to, let's just try to turn it around and say, if let's say you're a Bill O'Brien spokesman, how do you paint the picture in a positive light of why those moves were made?
Those moves were made because it's all about the team. Capital T, capital E, capital A, capital M. Every decision that is made is for the betterment of the Houston Texans. And, they weren't able to agree on financials with Jadeveon Clowney, and they felt the best way that he could help the team was by bringing in a special teams contributor with Barcavius Mingo and Jacob Martin, another prototypical edge rusher in a 3-4. Also by getting an extra draft pick. And with Hopkins, there's 3 years left on his deal. And if you sign him with 3 years to go on his deal, then you open it, then you set a precedent for some of the other players who want to rework their contract.
Yeah,
so
that's,
you
and by
gotta,
the way, I don't want to cut you off there, Mark, but that's important to note that Watkins, like you said, 3 years left, and he wanted a new deal. So there's reasons. Yeah. It wasn't just like, oh, we got to trade him just to trade him. He didn't get along with him. That's a problem. That's so. I'm glad you reminded everybody to some people who didn't get that.
Again, I'm playing the role of Bill O'Brien.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, that's the job.
With a 3-time All-Pro like that, who one of those All-Pros was earned with Tom Savage and T.J. Yates throwing him the ball in 2017 because Watson got injured on November the 2nd, 2017. It was a Thursday, and they were 3-4 on the season. So it really was those guys for 9 games. Anyway, I don't know.
By the way, I don't
think
Bill Belichick would have given him a new deal.
Belichick, but see, that's the thing, though, and that's what O'Brien's trying to do. Now to go back to the Bill O'Brien spokesman. That's what O'Brien is trying to do. That's what all these Belichick disciples try to do, is they come in and they try to you'll probably get this, but don't you remember in The Sopranos where after Tony got shot and he was coming back and he's sitting around with the guys and, they're kind of, he's out of the hospital and stuff, but he knows subconsciously that they're doubting him.
Oh, yeah.
And
he had to beat the crap out of that guy, right?
Yeah, so he's looking around the room and he's studying who, and so he just makes something up so he can punch the guy with the biggest muscles in the room to let everybody know, hey, I'm still the boss. So that's what the O'Brien disciples do. Like Matt Patricia when he shows up to Detroit, Josh McDaniels when he shows up to Denver and he wants to trade for Matt Castle and get rid of Jay Cutler when you already have a franchise quarterback and you tick off Brandon Marshall in the process. It's what they do. But with O'Brien, he really was taking over a, they were 2-14, but he had Watt buy-in. And so, and then Andre Johnson, they got rid of him the year after that, and then Arian Foster. But he got his guys in place. He won without, really everybody like that, like Johnson and Foster. So he was able to show that his way works. And if he can win without Hopkins, and it doesn't have such effect negatively on the team, then it's going to continue to show that the O'Brien way works, a la the way the Belichick way works with, so you want to redo your deal? Well, here's a team that'll work with you.
And by the way, the coach that really has done a terrific job is Brad Seeley. When I look around the NFL and I do my research for every team and changes, and I look at some of these special teams units that have been bad for like 10 years, and I'm like, you got the same coach for the last 5 years. They've been like one of the worst special teams units around. Why is he still the coach? Well, Houston made the right choice when they hired Seeley, because that unit is probably one of the top 2 or 3 units the last couple of years.
Yeah, and just to illustrate, with Dallas, they had Keith O'Quinn, someone that had been, like a quality control. I mean, it's a good story, worked his way up type. Okay, so they make him special teams coordinator in 2018. 2019, he just gets killed. And actually, there was that game with New England in the one right before Thanksgiving where Belichick and them just decided, we're going to rush off the left side, and they did, and they got a blocked punt on Christian. So, but it's the same thing with Seeley. Is he can help you procure the hidden yardage, come up with the free possessions, because if you can sabotage the other team's transition side of the game, I mean, that's huge. And
Underrated,
you saw
yes.
what happened. Now it helps when you have someone, with arms that reach up, higher than the Tower of Babel, like Angelo Blackson, to knock down field goals in Week 15 against the Titans. But still, you're absolutely right, Greg, when it comes to the knowledge that Brad Seeley brings. And I think that is one of the more underrated hires that Coach O'Brien has made over the past couple of seasons, because when he brought in Seeley, things changed. They fixed the transition aspect of the game. They weren't giving away any more free possessions. And now you've seen it manifest in terms of wins.
All right, last question. Pick 40, second round. Where if and I'm sure you've thrown this out there already several times as far as mock drafts, or whether it's a position or a specific player or two, give me some of the guys or some of the positions or the position that you think Houston's going to go with pick number 40.
I think that they could go with Greenard from Florida.
Okay.
Or, an edge rusher. Yep. I think that they could go Lloyd Cushenberry from LSU. And I've seen the name Jeff Gladney from TCU put in there at cornerback at 40, but you've got Garyon Conley and Lonnie Johnson, Vernon Hargreaves coming back, Bradley Roby you gave money to, and Philip Gaines you brought back. That's 5 guys. So if someone's got to go if you take Gladney at that spot. So that's why I really think it's an edge rusher or it's an interior offensive lineman, because then that helps you transition away from Zach Fulton. And if nothing else, get Sinio Kelemete off the roster.
Those are all pluses, no question.
No offense to Sinio. He does a great job. But in terms of veterans and maybe saving some salary cap, cap casualties, those are the 2 guys.
All right, Mark. Appreciate the extra time. It's a beautiful day, by the way. You're in Arkansas, right?
Yes, yeah. So this is what social distancing looks like in FEMA Region 6.
No mask?
So with the sun shining down, no mask, because we got the sunlight. Hopefully it'll kill the coronavirus.
I must say I get a kick out of it. I was watching the Weather Channel, and these guys on the Weather Channel, they're like out, I don't know, because of storms or whatever. And it's like they're in this field or wherever they're at, and there's nobody around for miles, and they've got their masks on. And I'm like, what are you doing with your mask on? You're not even nobody's around. I don't get that. I know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I know what it's about, but it's still it kind of makes me laugh a little that when they do stuff like that.
I just want to see these people with masks. I just want to go up to them and say, because this is really the thing, hey, don't be afraid. Because I think wearing the mask, there's anxiety about the world and your life and all that. And I just want to tell them, look, don't be afraid. Don't spend today in fear. You can keep the mask on if you want.
Sure.
But don't live in fear.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, because sometimes it does have the opposite effect, like you said. You look at somebody with a mask, and that can strike a little bit of fear in you. So yeah, good point.
Right. Fear wants to rework its deal with 3 years left. You got to ship it out.
There you go. Great point, Mark, to close out. And again, you are writing for the Texans Wire at USA Today. We'll talk to you between post-draft and hopefully at some point when they decide to get to training camp. And hopefully that won't be too far off in the distant future, because they got to get some practice in. By the way, that's the thing that I think that's the one thing I know I'm completely against with the discussion on the extra game and the playoffs, especially the extra game, is to take away all that practice. As a fan, I want practice. I want these guys to have more practice and less games, because the games will be better, but they don't think that way.
Yeah, and just as a part, an ender, when you take away the practices and you have more games, you're going to get sloppier football.
That's the point. Absolutely. Mark, great job as always. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you again real soon.
All right. Thanks, Greg.